History rarely repeats itself exactly, but its underlying patterns of power consolidation and economic competition are immutable. For 2 centuries, American foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere was defined by the Monroe Doctrine, a defensive declaration against foreign encroachment. But doctrines, like all systems of governance, evolve under pressure. By the early 21st century, the established order relied on international legal constraints and the appearance of multilateralism. The UN Charter, specifically Article 2.4, prohibited the use of force against the territorial integrity of any state. These guardrails were the framework of global stability. They were also a source of deep frustration for those who believed the United States had outsourced its strategic leverage. Venezuela, possessing the world's largest stated oil reserves, represented a catastrophic failure of this international system. Decades of Chavista rule, beginning in 1999, had transformed the state oil company, PDVSA, from a global giant into a dysfunctional engine of decay. Infrastructure crumbled, human capital fled, yet the vast subterranean wealth remained, held hostage by a regime indicted in Washington. The critical weakness of the existing order was its inability to resolve the internal rot of a resource-rich state without violating the very laws designed to prevent chaos. Stability was maintained through paralysis, making the system immensely fragile.
The decay was not merely political, it was structural and geological. Venezuelan crude is overwhelmingly heavy and sour, a technically difficult, high-sulfur product that requires extensive processing and costly diluents like naphtha. While the total reserves were immense, profitability was a question of staggering expense. New projects required an estimated break-even oil price of $80 per barrel to justify capital expenditure, far exceeding regional competitors. This poor economic reality posed a contradiction. Why launch a complex intervention for expensive oil when cheaper, more accessible resources lay nearby? The answer lay in geopolitical strategy, not profit. The new foreign policy architecture, dubbed the Donroe Doctrine by its advocates, aimed beyond extraction. Its goal was denial, preventing adversarial powers, Russia and China, from converting Caracas's vast debt into long-term strategic influence. The central actors in Washington were motivated by a zero-sum calculation. The operation was less about making money than about seizing control of the hemisphere's most strategically vital asset, regardless of the immediate balance sheet. The doctrine was an explicit shift, moving from the defensive posture of the Monroe era to one of explicit resource predation and regional dominance. This policy emerged from years of external pressure, political polarization, and a strategic impatience with the slow mechanisms of democratic transition. Stability became secondary to control.
Opposition to the Donroe Doctrine crystallized not through military resistance, but through international condemnation and geopolitical maneuvering. The global reaction was swift. Adversaries like China and Russia condemned the action as state terrorism and a dangerous template for future aggression, but they failed to intervene directly. The critical confrontation occurred not on the battlefield, but within the decaying structure of the Venezuelan state itself. The military intervention was, ironically, stabilized by the very apparatus it sought to overthrow. The negotiated extraction theory gained traction. The capture of Maduro was a cynical trade-off, negotiated by powerful Chavista loyalists, namely Vice President Delcy Rodriguez and National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez, to preserve the larger, decentralized network of military control and patronage. This allowed Washington to install a manageable proxy government, avoiding the catastrophic costs of full-scale occupation. However, the economic reality remained unforgiving. U.S. oil majors, seeking billions in compensation for seized assets, were hesitant. They pointed to the infrastructure damage and the $80 price barrier. The resource plunder was successful in establishing control, but failed to deliver the promised immediate economic returns. Resource denial to adversaries was achieved, but profitability was not. The outcome of this phase was a transitional equilibrium, political decapitation traded for structural preservation.
The success of Operation Absolute Resolve was not measured by profit, but by the establishment of a new strategic template. The Donroe Doctrine, rooted in the aggressive unilateralism of the 1904 Roosevelt Corollary, had replaced multilateral restraint. The intervention demonstrated that strategic resource denial and regime change, when executed with precision, could bypass international legal consequence, especially when the resulting jurisdiction was secured through domestic legal mechanisms. But this phase was only a transition. The long-term stability remained profoundly uncertain. The new proxy regime still had to contend with the military's internal loyalties, the threat of insurgency, and the massive, unresolved debt claims from China and Russia. The fundamental economic engine of the state remained crippled, requiring immense capital investment over years. What truly mattered was the shift in precedent. The capture of a head of state and the subsequent unilateral seizure of national assets, however strategically motivated, sent a clear signal across the globe. In moments of disorder, power emerges through action, and international conventions become subordinate to strategic necessity. This pattern, the collapse of consensus leading to aggressive consolidation, defines the new geopolitical era. The conflict had just begun.